The handcuffs clicked a little too tightly. Officer Rick Dalton didn't care. He never did. He yanked the woman's arm with one hand, pressed her chest against the hood of her black SUV with the other. Traffic slowed. People stared. Phones came out. And Rick, he smiled like he'd just saved the town from a menace. "This one's dirty," he muttered, loud enough for bystanders to hear. Bag of white powder under the seat. Might be fentanyl, might be worse. But the woman he'd just arrested didn't plead, didn't scream, didn't even flinch. She looked up, slowly, and locked eyes with him, calm, unshaken, almost bored. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked, voice cool and low. Rick sneered. "Lady, you're in no position to ask questions," and that's where he made his first mistake. Because the woman he'd just put in handcuffs wasn't just another target. She wasn't some random driver passing through town. She wasn't who he thought she was. She was the person who had signed the federal investigation into his precinct. She was the architect of a year-long operation, tracking corruption, drug movement, and dirty law enforcement in 3 southern counties. She was the director of the Federal Narcotics Task Force, but Rick didn't know that. Not yet. To him, she was just another black woman with tinted windows and out-of-state plates. Easy target, easy report. Just plant the bag, log the find, close the case. He didn't know she was sent to investigate him. Didn't know the car was rigged with internal surveillance. Didn't know every word he said had been recorded. He thought he was in control, and for the first 5 minutes he was, until the phone at his precinct rang, until the badge came out, until the weight of the system he abused began to turn against him. And by the time Rick realized who she really was, it was too late. The story had already been written. His downfall had already begun. This isn't just a story about one corrupt officer. This is a story about power, who wields it, who abuses it, and what happens when it ends up in the wrong hands. Or in this case, when someone tries to take it from the very person meant to uphold it. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to resist. All she did was wait, because she knew the truth, and the truth always rises. So how did a federal director end up in cuffs on a roadside in Georgia? How did a routine traffic stop turn into a federal scandal? And what happened after that badge came out? You're about to find out. Rick Dalton liked things simple. He liked pulling over drivers with tinted windows and expired tags. He liked the power he felt when someone looked scared to see him walking up to their window. And most of all, he liked that Millstone let him do all of that without questions. This was his territory, his routine, and no one had ever stopped him before. But when he ran the plate on that black SUV and saw it registered out of DC, something in him lit up. Federal plates always made him twitch. Most of them belonged to pencil pushers or government contractors who passed through for work. But this one had been parked near spots he didn't like people sniffing around, and he'd seen the driver before at the gas station on Oak, by the old rail lot, even near the used tire shop off Route 9. Always alone, always watching. That morning, he followed her quietly for almost 10 minutes. Nothing illegal, no sudden swerves, no lights out, until she turned left, and a reflection caught his eye, a faint crack in the right taillight. Not a big deal, barely visible in daylight, but it was enough. Enough for a reason, enough for paperwork. When he lit her up, she pulled over immediately. No hesitation, no panic. Her hands stayed on the wheel. Her eyes tracked him in the side mirror, calm. That annoyed him more than if she'd shouted. People like her were supposed to look nervous, not composed. "License and registration," he snapped. She handed them over without a word. "Where you headed?" "Just driving." He didn't like that either. Too brief, too sure of herself. He looked over the documents, everything clean. Then he glanced back at her. "You from DC? Born there?" "Yes." "And what brings you to Millstone?" "Quiet," she said. "I like the quiet." That was the third thing that got under his skin, her smile. Barely there, but controlled. Like she knew something he didn't. When he returned to his cruiser, he didn't just log her info, he made a call. "Got eyes on that woman I told you about. Driving a black Yukon. Right plate, right face. You sure she's not Law?" The voice on the other end paused. "She's clean, but too careful. Been spotted near the drop zones. You want her in. You do what you've got to do. Just make sure it sticks." That was all he needed. A green light. Nina Hall didn't move when she saw him walk back toward her car. She had already memorized the pattern. Hand on belt, right thumb grazing the edge of his radio. He was about to make his move. "You mind if I check inside?" he asked. Yes, she said plainly. I do. He nodded, then leaned closer. You got something to hide? No, she answered. Do you? Rick smirked. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. She paused just long enough for him to get impatient. Then she opened the door and stepped out. He walked her toward the hood, gestured for her to put her hands on it. For your safety and mine, he said. Then he reached inside the SUV while she stood motionless. It didn't take long before he called out, like a magician revealing a trick. Well, he said. What do we have here? He held up a sandwich bag with white powder in it. She didn't even blink. You want to explain this? She looked at him for the first time like he was beneath her. I don't need to explain anything. Rick grabbed her arm. The cuffs clicked. The crowd around them grew. A few onlookers pulled out phones, but before they could record anything substantial, Rick pointed toward them. Keep moving. This is official business. Some hesitated. One man mouthed, Is she okay? Nina didn't answer. Neither did Rick. He shoved her into the back of the cruiser like he had 100 times before. Drove off without a siren. He knew this needed to stay small. For now, the Millstone police station was quiet when they arrived. Officer Carol Vega, who worked the front desk, raised her eyebrows when she saw who Rick dragged in. That the one from the Yukon? Rick nodded, caught her holding. Carol looked skeptical. She doesn't look like a runner. Rick leaned in. She's been snooping. She fits the profile. Trust me. Carol didn't argue, but she didn't smile either. Inside the holding room, Nina sat alone. No cuffs now, no fear, just stillness. Her eyes scanned the room not in panic, but in calculation. She noted the lack of cameras in the corners. Cheap desk, peeling paint, a fake plant that hadn't been watered in weeks. This station had holes, big ones. When Rick walked in, she didn't even look up. She was already reaching for the phone on the table. I get a call, right? He rolled his eyes. One call. She dialed. It rang once. This is Director Hall, she said into the receiver. Code 77. Activate, passive sweep. I'm in Millstone, holding room 3. Then she hung up. Rick laughed. Who do you think you are? Exactly who I said, she replied. He sat across from her. You know, I was going to let you walk with a citation, until I found that bag. She didn't respond. Yeah. Not scared, he asked. No, you should be. People like you don't walk out of here without a record. Nina finally leaned forward. And people like you never think someone's watching until it's too late. Rick stood, irritated, and left the room. Back in his office, he shut the door and opened the drawer on his left. Inside was a flip phone, untraceable, no contacts saved. He called the number he'd memorized months ago. She's in holding, said her name's Hall, claimed to be some kind of director. Silence. Then, get rid of her. Rick froze. What do you mean? Make sure the charges stick. No press, no leaks. If she gets processed, we can pull strings later. Just bury her for now. He hesitated. She's not cracking. Then make her. The call ended. Meanwhile, across the state line, a small team in plain vans had already mobilized. The surveillance from Nina's vehicle had been triggered the moment Rick opened the door without consent. Every word he'd said, every movement he made, had been logged. The code phrase she used, Code 77, was a silent alarm. It meant, agent compromised, local law enforcement involved. Do not engage publicly. The team's lead, Agent Valerie Chen, leaned over a tablet as live feeds streamed. Looks like she let him go through with it, she muttered. Another agent asked. You think she baited him? No, Valerie said. I think she gave him a chance to prove what kind of man he really is. She picked up her radio. Go. Dark, we don't move until she says so. Back in Millstone, Rick returned to the room, holding a folder. He dropped it on the table. You've got 2 choices, he said. Sign this affidavit, admit the drugs are yours, or we run your fingerprints, and you stay the night in a cell. Nina tilted her head. And in the morning, he echoed, you'll be arraigned. She looked at the form, picked up the pen, clicked it twice, then put it down. I'll wait, she said. For what? She smiled for the first time since arriving. You'll see. Rick walked out, fuming. At that moment, across 3 different counties, quiet doors were opening. Court records were being pulled. Traffic stop data was being scrubbed. Anonymous complaints long buried were resurfacing on the screens of people who mattered. Internal affairs had just been pinged, and at the center of it all, The name Officer Rick Dalton had begun to light up in red dot. It was nearly midnight when Sergeant Leon Carter walked into the Millstone station, shoulders tense and voice low. He had received a call-in official off the record from a friend at the state capitol. "Get ahead of whatever's about to hit your department," the voice had warned, "because when it lands, it's not stopping." Leon didn't know the details, but he'd been around long enough to recognize the smell of a cover-up burning from the inside. When he stepped into the holding room and saw the woman sitting there poised, silent, calm, something clicked. "You're the one Rick brought in?" he asked, not unkindly. "I am. You claim to be with the feds." "I don't claim. I am." Leon nodded slowly, stepped out, and went to Rick's office. The door was ajar. Rick was leaning back in his chair, smug. "She's still in holding?" Leon asked. "Yep, playing the usual games. Says she's beat him, but that bag of powder says otherwise." Leon didn't respond. He stared at Rick for a moment longer than normal, then turned and walked to the evidence locker. He typed in his code, pulled the logbook. The bag Rick had submitted was listed under a false time stamped 2 hours before the traffic stop had even occurred. That's when Leon knew it was planted. He closed the locker quietly and walked back to the front desk. "Get me Deputy Vega, now." At 7:12 a.m., while most of Millstone was still asleep, a sealed internal report appeared in the inbox of the State Attorney General's office, marked Urgent Request for Federal Action. It had been written by Director Nina Hall herself months ago. It detailed possible collusion between small-town law enforcement and regional drug distributors. But most importantly, it contained a short, damning list of officers suspected of falsifying charges and planting narcotics. Rick Dalton's name was third. The report had sat dormant, waiting. Nina hadn't sent it earlier because she needed confirmation. She needed one of the suspects to commit the crime under federal surveillance. Rick had just delivered that on a silver platter. By 8 a.m., the DOJ was on the phone with the governor's office. By 8:30, an unmarked van rolled up behind the Millstone Police Department. Inside the van sat Valerie Chen and 3 agents from Internal Affairs, all dressed in plainclothes, all silent. Valerie glanced at the footage again. Rick, planting the bag, dragging Nina to the cruiser, lying through his teeth at booking, and Nina, not once raising her voice, not once losing her ground. She played him like a song. Valerie whispered. Rick never saw it coming. At 9:17 a.m., he was called into the conference room for an urgent departmental briefing. He strutted in, half smirking, expecting to hear praise or routine updates. Instead, he walked into a room where everyone had already gone silent. At the head of the table sat Nina Hall, not in cuffs, not in disguise. Her hair pulled back tight, a grey suit tailored to authority, a federal badge clipped clearly on her lapel. To her right, Valerie Chen. To her left, 2 men from Internal Affairs, folders stacked before them. Rick froze. "What is this?" Nina didn't smile. "This is your debriefing." He laughed, shaky. "You're not FBI." "You're right," she replied. "I'm D. I run the entire Southeastern Division." Rick stepped back, looking at the others in the room. Nobody said a word. "We have video," she continued, "of you planting evidence, of you fabricating a search, of you knowingly submitting false statements to your own department." Rick opened his mouth, but no sound came. "We also have records of phone calls made from your burner," Valerie added, "including one where someone told you to make it stick. That one hit like a hammer." "I didn't know who she was," Rick said, finally. "She was just..." She looked suspicious. "Stop," Nina cut in. "You didn't target me because you thought I was a dealer. You targeted me because I didn't look like someone you thought could fight back." She stood now, stepped closer. "But I didn't need to fight. I just needed you to do exactly what you've been doing to the people who didn't have a badge, who didn't have backup." Rick backed into the wall, breathing hard. Nina nodded toward the agents. "He's done." Rick lunged for the door, but it was too late. In the hallway, Sergeant Leon stood watching, not gloating, not smug, just resigned. He turned away before they cuffed Rick, walked out into the morning sun. He had a lot of paperwork to do, and a long, ugly history to help unravel. The news didn't break right away. That was part of the plan. Nina Hall wasn't interested in headlines or outrage. She was interested in building a case so airtight it would choke the entire chain of corruption from the inside. Rick Dalton's arrest was just the fuse. The explosion still had layers to ignite. After Rick was removed from the station, Nina stayed behind. She took over a temporary office in the building, the same office where they once processed low-income drivers like cattle. Now, it held binders full of field notes, flash drives with data, and names. Dozens of names. The plan had always been bigger than Rick. She spent the next 48 hours directing federal agents across 3 counties. Arrests were made at dawn. Computers seized. Warrants executed quietly. Sheriff Marsh, the department's long-standing kingpin, was picked up from his fishing cabin in Alabama by 2 U.S. Marshals who didn't say a word until the cuffs clicked. His eyes went wide when he heard the name Director Hall. Nina wasn't done. The drugs Rick had found in her SUV were sent to a federal lab. No fingerprints, no DNA, but the bag was tagged with a barcode code linked to a case already closed in Mississippi 2 years ago, meaning the evidence had been recycled, likely from an old bust no one was supposed to notice. Someone had gone deep into the system to retrieve and repurpose it. That wasn't just a rogue cop tactic. That was organized, and so the dominoes fell. Internal affairs reopened. 39 old arrests tied to Rick's shifts cases dismissed without explanation, or pleaded out under threat. Victims were contacted. Some cried, some cursed. One man simply whispered, "Finally." But the twist: Nina never filed federal charges against Rick. Not the big ones, not yet. Instead, she visited him in holding alone, without backup. She stood on the other side of the glass, arms crossed. Rick barely looked up. "You came to gloat," he muttered. "No," she said. "I came to offer you a deal." He laughed bitterly. "You've already got me. What could I possibly offer you?" "Testimony," she replied. "From the inside. Who tipped you off? Who paid you? What routes were protected? Who else wore a badge and looked the other way?" Rick scoffed. "You think I'm just gonna spill all that? You won't do it for me," she said, then paused. "But maybe you'll do it to save your mother." He froze. "She's listed as the primary owner of your second property, the one that's been receiving bulk cash transfers every 2 weeks. He looked away. "I don't need a confession to ruin her," Nina said flatly. "I have paperwork, but that's not my goal. You helped me clean house. She keeps her house." Rick closed his eyes. "People like you," she added quietly, "think you can twist justice, but justice has reach and memory, and it doesn't forget who helped make things right." That night, he signed a 17-page affidavit. Over the next 3 weeks, the federal task force moved methodically. More names, more arrests. 3 judges were removed from the bench. 2 mayors resigned. 1 district attorney went on extended medical leave. The DOJ called it the most surgically precise corruption takedown in recent Southern history. And through it all, Nina Hall never held a press conference, never once appeared on camera. She didn't need a spotlight. She already had the results. But one day, as she packed her files into a black carry-on, a young rookie officer, black, barely 24, approached her in the hallway. She'd seen him watching quietly during the sweeps. "Ma'am," he said, "I just want to say thank you for not letting them keep getting away with it." She nodded. "It's your department now. Don't waste it." He looked down, then back up. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "You weren't afraid, doing all this undercover, knowing what they could have done to you?" She tilted her head. "Of course I was." He blinked. "But being afraid and being silent are not the same thing," she said. "I chose one." Later that evening, Nina sat at a diner just outside the Millstone town line. Same booth she'd used months ago to log her first night's observations. This time, she had no notes, just a cup of tea, and the sound of normal life returning around her. The waitress, unaware of who Nina really was, smiled. "You passing through, hun?" Nina smiled back. "Just finishing something I started." She tipped well, walked out without looking back. A month later, the world kept turning. The headlines faded. The legal process crawled on. Courtrooms filled with names that used to carry power. Some pleaded guilty, others swore innocence. Most were met with files they couldn't explain and footage they couldn't deny. But Nina Hall didn't stay for the trials. Her work was done. She returned to D.C. with little fanfare, just a quiet arrival at headquarters and a short meeting with her superior. He offered her a commendation. She declined. "I wasn't looking for recognition," she said. "I was looking for accountability." She sat in her office alone that afternoon, lights dimmed, the weight finally settling. Not the weight of fear or anger, but of knowing how close it had all come to failing. Had her timing been off by hours? Had her badge not been hidden just well enough? Had that surveillance system glitched once, things could have ended very differently. She could have become just another name, another case number, another woman, told to comply and explain herself to men who never had to. But she hadn't. She'd waited, she'd let them reveal themselves, and then, with precision and law on her side, she moved. That's what justice looks like sometimes. Not loud, not fast, but exact. A few weeks later, Nina received a letter handwritten, no return address. She opened it slowly. Inside were just 2 lines. You made them listen. You made me believe again. K. She didn't know who K was. Maybe one of the officers still on the inside. Maybe one of the victims she never got to meet. Maybe a stranger who watched it unfold from afar. She folded the letter, placed it in a drawer with others. Over the years, she had gathered a small collection, quiet voices, grateful voices, angry ones too. All of them reminders that silence may be easier, but truth is louder when it's built on facts, not fear. There are stories we don't hear because they end too soon. There are others we don't hear because someone fought hard enough to make sure they ended right. Nina Hall never raised her voice. She never needed to. Her power wasn't in her title. It was in her patience, her plan, her refusal to let people like Rick Dalton decide who gets justice and who gets buried. She knew something most people forget, that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who already knows the truth and is just waiting for you to lie. If this story moved you, or reminded you that justice doesn't always wear a uniform, subscribe to Radio Life Stories. We tell the stories they tried to bury, we amplify the voices they tried to silence, and we believe that power, when used right, leaves a legacy that can't be erased.